Welcome. Here we are on a Thursday night this week for my Principles of Good Health. This is number 6 in the series. I'm hoping there'll be some people watching live tonight. So if you start watching, please say hi, do a little thumbs up, little heart, something to know you're there. And remember, do add some comments, or if you've got any questions as I'm going along, then please let me know. So tonight I am talking about how to choose foods to help boost your energy, because I find in practice this is such a fundamental problem for people. Just about everybody who comes along seems to have lower energy than they'd actually like. So that's what I'm really going to focus on today. And at the end, I will be launching my Facebook Live challenge, which will be going ahead on the 2nd of March. There'll be more details about that to follow at the end of this series, this Facebook Live tonight. So as I said, if you're here, say hi, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you tonight. Hoping many of you can catch up with us later if you're not able to watch it live. So energy, it's a fundamental problem, and I do find with winter, energy can be lower than normal throughout the winter, and I do find the gloomy weather and the dark nights, and particularly this year when it's been so gloomy, I do feel that alone has a bit of an impact on our energy. And one of the things I feel is that, in the evenings, I certainly find it that I don't feel as energetic in the evenings as I would do if it was still light outside. And I think this is a natural part of our, what I call our circadian rhythms. We are designed to, our sleep-wake cycle is very much closely linked with day and night. And therefore, as it's much darker in the winter, then I think it's quite natural that we don't want to be as energetic in the evenings, and we perhaps want to sort of snuggle down and perhaps go to bed earlier. And I think that's perfectly natural, and we shouldn't try and fight it if that's how we feel. And just a few other things that could be an impact for energy, but it's not what I actually want to focus on tonight. Iron is important for energy. Often people think, energy, it's to do with iron. Well, it can be, because iron is a fundamental part of hemoglobin in our red blood cells, and that's what carries oxygen is required to help create energy in our cells. So iron is important, as is B12, because B12 is important to help create red blood cells that then goes on to carry oxygen around our body. So those are important. Daylight, I think, is also important. Doing some movement, not necessarily strenuous exercise, but it's all about movement, being active and moving. So that's really important for this and for energy. But let's go on now to talk about the thing that I focus on most of the time with clients. And this is to do with blood sugar fluctuations, the glucose in our bloodstream, and why this is so important for people's energy and possibly yo-yoing energy throughout the day. And this is what I focus on first of all, and this can have an absolutely fundamental difference to people's energy levels. So what happens is that glucose in the bloodstream is the primary fuel for creating energy in the body. The body can create energy using proteins and fats, but the primary fuel that the body tends to use is the glucose. That's the sugar that comes from the bloodstream primarily. So why is that important, and why does this go on to affect our energy levels? Well, what happens is our glucose in our bloodstream, the body wants to create what I call homeostasis. So if you think about our temperature and our blood pressure, we like to keep that in range. The body wants to keep that within a certain range, within this sort of homeostatic range. And it's the same with the glucose in the bloodstream, because whilst it's essential to have glucose in the bloodstream for energy purposes. If it gets too high, it can be dangerous. And if it gets too low, it's also dangerous. If you think about it, our brain has to have a constant supply of glucose to be controlling and creating what's going on in the body. And so if glucose goes too low, it sends out a bit of an alarm signal. And equally, if it goes too high. So what has this got to do with energy? Because you could say, well, surely it's fine. If the more glucose I put into the body, then that's brilliant because we need the glucose to create energy. Well, no, it's because of this homeostatic factor that goes on and keeping it within certain range. And that's what causes it all to go out of fluctuation throughout the day. So depending on what we eat has this impact on our blood sugar levels, the glucose in our bloodstream, because what happens is everything that is a carbohydrate, and I'll come back to talk about what a carbohydrate is, everything that is a carbohydrate breaks down in the gut through the digestive process and turns into simple sugars. The vast majority of those are going to be glucose. It's a simple sugar. So that gets passed through into the bloodstream. And as I said, if we keep that within certain ranges, everything is hunky-dory. We've got lots of glucose there and the right amount. It's in a sort of steady state. And that's available there for the cells to create the energy that we need throughout the day, because every cell in our body needs to create energy. But if we have a lot of carbohydrates in our diet, then we are going to find that there is too much glucose passing into the bloodstream at any one time, and this can create the spikes that we hear about. And here I'm not trying to get into the realms of talking about diabetes, although that is something that has a knock-on effect later on if we have too much glucose constantly going into the bloodstream. But this is all to do with carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates can come from vegetables and it can come from fruit, and we have to remember that every time we eat vegetables and fruit, at different rates, they get broken down into simple sugars. I'm not saying we don't eat those are absolutely important, but they do also create glucose, as well as other valuable minerals and vitamins and the fibre that's so important to us. But the other carbohydrates that tend to have this real impact on our regulating the glucose level in our bloodstream are all the starchy ones. These are the breads and the pastas and the rice and the potatoes and the starchy root vegetables like parsnips and swede. They're very, very starchy. Bananas are also very, very starchy, and I find now people are eating huge numbers of bananas throughout the day, and they're very, very starchy. And the more starch there is, the more sugar there is. There's more sugar to be broken down, and it can get broken down into the glucose really, really quickly and flood the bloodstream with too much glucose. And what happens is we have this hormone called insulin that you'll probably have heard about in relation when we talk about diabetes. But insulin is a hormone that's fundamentally important to take the glucose into the cells to be used as energy. So again, you might think, well, that's great. That's really important. We need lots of that. But no, if there is too much glucose, then there's going to be more insulin that's released to try and move the glucose and utilize this glucose that's in the bloodstream. But there comes a point when our cells have enough glucose and they don't need any more for their immediate needs for energy production in the cells. And so the body will try and store it somewhere. And it will store it in the liver or in the muscles, or it stores it actually as fat, but that's getting on to another topic. But it's why we end up with gaining weight through too many carbohydrates in our diet. But if we end up storing it and there's too much insulin released in response to this too much glucose, this is when the glucose level in the bloodstream can come crashing down too quickly and too rapidly. And it's when the glucose levels gets too low in the bloodstream that we have problems with our energy levels. It can really make people feel tired. And it's what's known as that post-lunchtime slump. I'm sure we've all been on courses, and the poor instructors there are trying to run a course, and you've been off for your lunch and you've had a jacket potato or a sandwich and a packet of crisps. And then we go back in the afternoon for our afternoon session, and you find people just cannot keep their eyes open because you're in a warm, stuffy room and they've eaten too many carbohydrates at lunchtime, and then the body's taken this glucose and too much of it out of the bloodstream, and then the body just feels really tired and it hasn't got that energy needed, and the eyes just can't stay open. That's something that I think we've all either experienced ourselves or has seen it happen to other people. So it is this yo-yoing fluctuation that creates this yo-yoing effect on our energy, and it's the number one thing I see in clinic more than anything else, and it's the number one thing that can actually be turned around really, really quickly. So how do we boost our energy through the foods we eat? And I'm going to show hold something up, and I realise the words are going to be printed back to front, but I'm just going to explain this diagram to you. Now on the green side, this is what I call a healthy plate. I appreciate it's back to front on here, but if you envisage that on the green, roughly sort of 45, maybe even 50% of what should be the vegetables, not just green ones, but all non-starchy vegetables. So they could be mushrooms and courgettes and peppers and green beans and peas and even carrots. It could be the salad vegetables and all of those types of things. We want to have plenty of those, the broccolis, the cauliflowers, we want plenty of those on our plate. They're full of fibre and they're full of the most valuable nutrients that we need. Now over here in the purple, this bit is what's written there is actually says protein and fats. And this little bit in yellow up here, and I've written there 20%, are the starchy carbohydrates, which are the root vegetables, the potatoes, the parsnips and the Swedes, and down here in the proteins and the fats. So this is everything to do with your meats and your fish and your pulses, your nuts and seeds, your tofu, all eggs and a little bit of dairy. They're all protein foods. They all contain some fats of variable degrees. I also add in here the olive oils, the butter, coconut oil and things like that that you might be using for cooking, or olive oil that you might sprinkle on salad. That is what I call a healthy plate. It's healthy for many reasons, but it's very, very healthy when we come to talk about balancing our blood sugar levels. So let me just explain why that's so important for energy. Now, the reason why is because it all comes back to digestion, my favourite topic, but let me just briefly explain why. Protein foods take a long time to be broken down. The denser the protein food, the even longer it takes to break them down. They go to the stomach first of all, and they sit there for 2 hours or even longer because proteins take a long time to be pulled apart and broken down. Now, if you imagine, if you have a meal that doesn't contain any protein or a very small amount of protein, the food won't sit in the stomach for very long. It moves from there into the small intestines, the next phase of digestion. And if it's a predominantly carbohydrate heavy meal, the food is very quickly broken down into simple sugar if it isn't the simple sugar already, and quickly goes into the bloodstream. If there's a lot of protein in the meal, and on that slide there I showed you about a third of that plate consisting of protein with fats, it's going to stay in the stomach for a lot longer, and the whole meal is churned up together to be broken down, and there's a slower drip feed into the small intestines, and therefore a much slower rate that the carbohydrate content is converted to the simple sugars. So you get this drip feed effect of the glucose into the bloodstream, helping to keep it at this steady state throughout the day. And when we get that, not only do we feel fuller for longer, and there's less inclination to want to snack on other foods throughout the day, but it keeps our glucose at this steady state for a much longer period of time. And it just helps our mood and our concentration, but it certainly has a massive impact on our energy. So the proteins I mentioned are the fats, the meats and the fish, and it could be the pulses and lentils, nuts and seeds, tofu, eggs, dairy. They're all protein foods. You've got oily fish with lovely fats in there. If you're eating some red meat, there's going to be some fat in there, and that's not a bad thing. The fats there also help to slow this down in a positive way. Now, the starchy carbohydrates, it's not to say you shouldn't have any, and we're all unique individuals, and the amount we can eat in terms of helping to keep our energy levels stable is going to vary from one person to another. And I always say to clients, you will know when you get this right, because your energy will feel much better. Your concentration and your mood is likely to be much better throughout the day. So I put 20%, and it could be 25%. And for some people, you may even not put any starchy carbohydrates on your plate. And this is perfectly fine for individuals. But as I said, you need to gauge on how you feel and what is right for you. But the starchy carbohydrates are your rice and your pasta and your bread, your crackers, your root vegetables. Those are the things that we need to keep in moderation. And when you keep that plate in that healthy, balanced way, it really should have a very positive effect on your energy level. So when we think about what to eat, if we're thinking about breakfast, if people eat, say, porridge or some other muesli or a low sugar cereal and they think they're being really healthy, I always encourage people to add maybe some nuts and seeds to the breakfast, because those fats and the proteins in the nuts and seeds help to do the slowing down of the digestion and help to keep that more steady state of glucose in the bloodstream. We want lots of the non-starchy vegetables and we want a low amount of the starches. We need to watch our fruit intake. People tend to eat and snack on far too much fruit. And whilst I don't disagree that fruit can have a lot of healthy and beneficial nutrients, we need to obtain most of those nutrients from our vegetables, because fruit is actually very, very sugary, and it depends on the types of fruits. So your grapes and your bananas and all your tropical fruits contain high amounts of sugar, simple sugars. So there's no digestion involved really. They're already the simple sugars and they can go into the bloodstream quite quickly. Dried fruit is condensed fruit, has condensed amounts of sugar, so we really need to watch those. And we do need to watch fruit juice as well. And I tend to say we shouldn't really touch fruit juice because of the sugars in it. So do watch the fruit. It's not to say you can't have any, but it's better to have some fruit with a meal rather than just snacking on fruit on its own, just because of the sugar concentration. Berries are brilliant. There are many beneficial compounds in berries that we do need. All those dark coloured berries and the red ones and the purple ones are so good for us. And they're actually quite low in sugar, so they're great. The less sugary apples are fantastic. We tend to all go for the pink ladies these days, but they're very sweet. That's why we like them so much. So they're not the best choice to go for. I like Cox's apples. The smaller ones are better. Some pears are good, some plums. It's not to say you can't have the other fruit, it's just being wary of the amount of sugar that's in them. If you are going to snack on some fruit on its own, just think about having something alongside it that's the protein and fats. And this is where nuts can be really helpful to have alongside some fruit. Do watch the snacks and do think about whether you actually need a snack. We don't need to be snacking constantly throughout the day, and this can actually have a negative impact on when we're trying to control our energy levels rather than a positive one, depending on the type of snack that we're eating. Because if the snack, as I said, is a piece of fruit, it may have a detrimental effect on keeping our energy levels stable. So that brings me to an end on that topic. Now, my announcement is that I'm ready to launch my 5-day challenge on Facebook. I'm going to add it as a later post. I'll be posting about this separately. And I'm calling this my 30 in 5 Facebook challenge. And this is all about helping to keep the gut health, the gut bacteria in healthy numbers, all about having a healthy gut for many, many reasons, which will all be explained in the event page on Facebook. You'll find details in the event page on Facebook. I will be posting it separately and you'll be able to sign up for this. It's going to be run as a closed Facebook group on the 2nd of March. I've moved it back a week. I was a little bit slow to get this all together and ready to launch. So it's going to be on the 2nd of March for 5 days. Monday the 2nd of March, 5 days. I will be giving lots of information. I'll be doing some Facebook Lives or some pre-recorded videos every single day. And there will be recipes in there and simple ways to help you achieve. And what this is about is being able to achieve 30 different types of plant foods that help to feed the gut bacteria and help to keep the gut healthy, and how you can do 30 different plant foods in 5 days. So it's my 30 in 5 challenge, and I hope you're going to join me and take part in this, because whilst it's a challenge for all of us, I'm going to try and show you that there can be some simple ways to achieve this. And I hope that you'll also post your own 30 in 5 ideas that you're doing, or maybe some recipes and different things that you're doing to help achieve 30 in 5 during the week that will all help each other. So look in the events section. It might not be there just yet, but it's certainly going to be there by tomorrow. And I will add a link in the comments, and on other Facebook posts I'll be putting the link in there so you can sign up to the challenge, get access to the closed group and participate, I hope, in this 5-day challenge with me on the 2nd of March. So thanks for listening, and I will be live next week doing my normal Facebook Live But again, I can't do the Tuesday, and it will be on Thursday next week again at 6 o'clock. So take care, enjoy the rest of the week, and take care over the weekend with this storm Dennis that's coming our way. Bye.